China, with India. Many of these countries don't have with Pakistan. And the way that they're managing right now within BRICS is so amazing to see, and how they're trying to do their best in order to bring all of these countries together.
I think this is a very big compliment you're making to Russian diplomacy. And I agree completely that Russian diplomacy is highly professional and very skillful in dealing with these very difficult countries and relationships that they have with one another, and not getting caught in the middle of their disputes. But I want to add, though, that the Russian diplomacy and Mr. Lavrov, for all of his experience as the doyen of major power diplomats in the world, longest serving and most professional, hardest working, they are not their own men. What they're doing, what Lavrov does, is implement what his boss tells him to do. So the master plan that Russian diplomacy implements is coming from the office of Vladimir Putin. I don't mean to suggest that Putin himself is the author of everything that bears his signature. Of course not. He's remarkably hardworking and so on, but he's not superhuman. He also has his limitations in time and space. But what I see in Putin is unusual, and I have various ways of measuring this and justifying what I'm about to say, is that he has been not just an intellectual leader, although that didn't come quickly. He was a follower, as you were suggesting a minute ago, particularly early in his presidency, continuing the rapprochement, the drawing closer, the hopeful expectations that we Russians and Americans can be great friends. He continued that. So it took a while before he found his own position, particularly after 2008, when he had no choice but to find a new position. But not just as an intellectual leader, but as a man manager. I think that he has remarkable talent in this area, which nobody talks about. All you get is the usual flippant and ignorant statements about how he was a KGB operative. This is much more important if you watch his conduct, is how he was a graduate of St. Petersburg Law School, because he's very legalistic minded. But he is a man manager. For that, he obviously has an innate talent, because he was a rank and file intelligence analyst in Germany. He wasn't managing tens of people. I wonder if he even had a secretary to manage. The point is that he quickly learned. And what do I find outstanding here? I don't think I'm the only one who compares him at his 24 years in power as a Peter the Great of our age. And there's a certain specific similarity that I want to bring up, because nobody talks about it. And it bears on my stating now that he is a man manager of extreme competence. Peter the Great had around him opportunists, liars, thieves, cheats, people who were raised from rags to riches very often arrived at in a thief-like way. And he kept them on, and he promoted them to get the best out of them for Russia's benefit. And that is exactly how Mr. Putin has conducted himself. He has been surrounded by thieves and liars. Chubais was a perfect example of it. We stole billions, if not just millions, from the Russian state. But he has kept by his side people whom he thought could make major contributions to the welfare of the country. And he has used them for Russia's benefit, knowing for certain all of their personal drawbacks and their vices. He kept Prigozhin on, when when he had proven himself less than loyal. I mean, before the mutiny, after this big public fight that he had with Putin's senior military people. It was out in public. They were being denounced by Prigozhin, and Putin kept him on and tolerated him so long as he could perform and do things that were valuable to Russia, which he did. And this is a distinguishing feature that I think has to be brought up in any discussion of Putin.
When you look at Europe today, considering your recent article, in your opinion, what's going on in Europe? I've seen a interview of Marine Le Pen with CNN, with Christiane Amanpour on CNN. Christiane Amanpour was calling her a far-right candidate, and she said that, no, we are not far-right, we are a center-right party. But it seems that Le Pen is totally, in my opinion, is totally correct when she says it's center-right. We don't see far right, far left right now in the European Union, because the outcome of Meloni, for example, in Italy, was the same outcome as we see in Germany and other countries. Doesn't seem that they have any sort of difference when it comes to their policy in Ukraine, for example. What's your understanding of this?
Well, we'll get to the question of how these various movements or parties see Ukraine. But I'd like to come back to adjectives, which are very important because they are like these dog whistles. They are sending out messages that are instantly perceived and understood without the one blowing the whistle having to say much. And that is misleading, seriously misleading. To speak in terms, as we open this discussion, to speak in terms of centrist right, extreme right. Well, extreme already is an adjective that tells you that the speaker doesn't like these people. Who likes extreme? By definition, a normal-headed person wouldn't. They are inaccurate. They are not telling you what's going on. Just like if you listen to American, particularly American politicians who are talking about identity politics, or talking about inclusiveness by bringing in LGBT and Lord knows what else. This is meant to be misleading. So let's go to the essence of what people really are talking about. In the latter case, when I'm talking inclusiveness or these identity politics are intended to distract the audience from what politics are all about, always have been, and someday in the near future will revert to be, which is about how you divide up the economic pie and who gets what from the economy. That's what politics are supposed to be about. And when you talk identity politics and minority politics, it's intentionally distracting the voter from what politics are all about. But let's go back to the extreme right, far right, whatever the adjective they put here. That's not what her party stands for. It's not what Orban stands for. It's not, to a lesser extent, what Meloni stands for. What we're talking about here, and particularly well defined now in the group of patriots that Orban is putting together, it is, first of all, less EU. And what does they mean by less EU? It is a declaration of nationalism. Nationalism is by definition in the lexicon of the authoritarian left it is meant to be misleading. The nationalism is said to be a cause of wars. The European adventure, the creation of the EU, was supposed to be about preventing wars. And so, logically, you should be throttling, strangling nationalism. But there's more to it than that. They're also, when you deny people their national identity, you are denying them their identity, and you're preparing the way for fascism and for dictatorship. If people do not have an identity, religious, ethnic, otherwise, they have nothing to fall back upon. They are atomized in front of an authoritarian state. So all of these people professing liberal values, that is all completely phony and intentionally misleading. Nationalism is one thing, but that's not the whole story at all. Let's take a less emotive word, a word that has been used a lot by Mr. Putin and now is being used by other people. The word here is sovereignty. Mr. Orban is talking about Hungarian sovereignty. Welders is talking about sovereignty. Even Meloni, weak reed that she is talking about Italian sovereignty. As opposed to globalism, which is denying national distinction because national distinction is bad, and replacing it with this amorphous, empty designation as like citizeness of the French Revolution. They are denying people their birthright for the sake of stealing their power. It is all, I mean, I said that politics is about economics and dividing the pie. The politics on a personal level of those who are practicing it is about power. And they are using these various word games to seize power and to hold power against the popular will and against the interests of their own people.
Do you have any hope for the European Union with the current situation, considering the current situation of the Union, to be a powerhouse? Everybody, I think, European Union needs to be a powerhouse, just independent of Russia, China, the United States, just deciding, considering their benefits. I'm talking about each and every of these countries, or even together.
For it to be a powerhouse, it has to change its thinking entirely about what makes for power. The present conformist vassals of the United States who occupy the positions of power in the European Union have a mantra, and the mantra is there's unity gives us strength. I contest that. Unity in pursuit of delusional objectives gives you weakness. And all I see around me is weakness that thinks that it's strength because all 27 people or countries are saying the same thing. But 27 times wrong is still wrong, with just in bigger letters. And what they're saying is dead wrong, or their understanding of so many factors in their neighborhood, starting with Russia, of course, is dead wrong. So Europe cannot be a superpower if all of its thinking is founded on a fallacy that Europe cannot be a superpower if it denies the civilizational values that it pretends to promote, starting with freedom of speech. There is very little freedom of speech in Europe. much less than in the United States. And why is that? The United States, as if the United States hasn't had its fit of McCarthyism, not just going back in the early days of the Cold War, but 10 years ago. When I was a visiting fellow at Columbia in 2010, 2011, and what I saw around me was the after effect of the general paranoia that hit America after 9/11, when Americans willingly traded freedom for security. Our journalists in newspapers like the Financial Times that pretend to be very intellectual, they like to speak about Russians who trade a chicken in every pot for security and let the government do what it wishes. Well, that isn't very true, not at all, from my experience. But that's a separate issue. The main issue is that's exactly what Americans have done. They traded after 9/11 a hope for security against any say in how they're governed. And that psychology, that is destructive of freedom and destructive of the values that our leaders pretend to honor in Europe. Now, that was the case before Mr. Trump. Mr. Trump came along. I don't like Mr. Trump particularly. I don't like him as a personality. I don't like his boastfulness, his arrogance, his ignorance, and whatever else. There are many things you can bring against him, including lying, of course. But I'm more tolerant of lying because it comes with the job. You cannot be perfectly frank and honest if you are a president. That's a separate issue of taking us back to Machiavelli and the Prince. The question is about what Mr. Trump did for all of us, wittingly, unwittingly, let's say unwittingly, by saying what he did in the 2016 campaign, by putting in question NATO, by putting in question the value of hostility with Russia. He freed us all. I can tell you right now that take a publication that was widespread, widely subscribed to among American academics, Johnson's Russia List. Johnson's Russia List still is a daily digest of articles about Russia, about Ukraine, by professionals, for professionals. In the period before Mr. Trump got his campaign going well, you could just die of boredom reading it because all of the entries were by the slavish scribes and propaganda disseminators of the State Department. Nobody dared to say something different because they didn't want to lose their tenured positions, or they didn't want to lose the respect of their colleagues. Mr. Trump opened his mouth and started saying things that if we, ordinary mortals, had said, we would have had the FBI at our door. He said it. They could not touch him. Then he kept on saying it when he was president. He gave us freedom. And those who say how horrible he's divided us, what is politics about if not division? If politics is everyone singing from the same songbook, you don't need elections. It is, you only get to the truth and you only get to good or better policies if they are questioned, if there are debates, and if there is serious difference of opinion. Unfortunately, Europeans have forgotten these things, and they keep on saying how horrible it is for anyone to divide us. The Russians are trying to divide us, but they don't tolerate any dissent or any other thinking. When you have no dissent, you have inferior intellectual roadmaps. You have to have dissent. You have to have differences of opinion publicly expressed and defended if they're going to arrive at anything resembling workable policies. and good policies, as opposed to intellectually inferior policies. Here in Europe, they just don't get it. And they keep on clamoring for unity when what we need is division.
Yeah. It seems that the conflict in Ukraine is approaching to the final stages, but at the same time, we're witnessing that the United States is forcing Europe and to move them toward China, to be more aggressive toward China. And the question would be, we know that Europe was totally in line with the United States foreign policy in Russia, in sanctioning Russia. But when it comes to China, how capable is Europe to do that, and how damaging that would be for Europe?
Well, there won't be much left of the European economy. This economy is limping along. You have to keep in mind that the destruction of the economy does not occur from one day to the next. It's a slow process. Back in the 1980s, I worked for a company called ITT, International Telephone and Telegraph, which was the world's biggest conglomerate put together by a business genius, a financial genius called Howard Janine, and operating in all kinds of different industries. And I knew soon after I joined, this ship is going down. It had new management. It didn't understand. And it was a victim of the business wisdom, horses for courses. The business model that Mr. Janine created did not long survive him as a viable model in a new business and interest environment. Interest is a key word. It's always a major factor in viability of businesses. Well, that kind of issue is what we see today. Here in Europe, the economy is sinking, but not in the way that you can see other people are going to drown tomorrow. No, but it's heading in that direction. When I walk down the street here in Brussels and made the major in the past made a major commercial street and elegant center of elegance since its creation at the turn of the 20th century, Avenue East, there are so many shops that are vacant. When I hear the Belgian authorities say that we have 2% inflation, yeah, maybe year on year, but we have like 40% inflation going back 2 years. When you go to a restaurant, you see prices that are 40% higher than they were the last time you looked. I don't want to hear about 2% inflation. It's nonsense. And so it is about the state of the economy. You just have to keep your eyes open. And they tell you much more valuable things than what you can read in the Soir or Écho de la Bourse about the state of the economy. You see those empty shops. It tells you the real state of the economy, not good. And in Germany, it's a lot worse. Here in Belgium, we have a lot of protections put in place to prevent popular disturbances, namely inflation adjustments to shut up the labor unions and to counteract the worst effects of inflation. They're much less practiced in Germany, although Mr. Scholz tried at various times to take the pain out of the soaring energy costs to households. In general, the protection of the German consumer is less solid there. And the state of the German economy is deteriorating sharply. The biggest export industries are the worst hit ever since the start of this economic war with Russia. I have in mind particularly the automobile industry. Really, you speak to people who have friends who are working in the major German car producers, and they know that this or that product line is down 30%, not 1 to 2%. So the decline of the European economy, given that they're so big and so rich, it takes time for the poverty and underlying weakness to become evident to everyone. But its trajectory is clear. Europe is in serious decline. And the people who are in charge like Mr. Scholz. He's not capable of seeing, appreciating, let alone responding to these facts that are obvious to anybody who has a bit of sense in finance and business.
Just to wrap up this session, do you see a future for European Union together with Russia when this conflict comes to an end? And everybody want to know what would be the new face of Europe, what would be the future of Europe without Russia. Is that possible in your opinion?
Well, how this war ends and how the European elites survive this will determine the outcome that you are asking me about. If NATO crumbles, if it faces the fact that it has not lived up to the reason of its foundation, which was to keep Russia down and out, and it turns out that Russia is resurgent, far more powerful, far more rational, and much better led than the NATO member countries, and these people are chased out, then what can come about is, as you say, a reconciliation, an acceptance of basic economic facts of life, which is that Russia is the best and most accessible source of critical materials for the European economy. And then logic will prevail, economic logic. But if the present elites manage to hold on to their vestiges of power and deny power to those who have better understood the situation and are better prepared to find a way out of the crisis, then I'm afraid Europe will not rise to the challenge and extricate itself from the present downward course that I've just described a moment ago.